October 1875, the buck stood frozen on the ridgeline, its breath misting in the cold morning air of Pikes Ridge, Colorado. Matthew Crowder raised his Sharps rifle, steadied his breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the valley, echoing between granite walls. The buck dropped. A clean kill at 300 yards. Matthew rose from his position, brushing pine needles from his buckskins. 7 years in these mountains had honed his skills to a razor's edge. He'd become more creature than man, beard to his chest, hair tied back with rawhide, eyes sharp as a hawk's. The mountains had taken his pain and given back solitude in return. He approached the buck, knife drawn to dress it before the meat spoiled. The first cut was deep when he heard it, the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats. Matthew went still. No one came up this mountain. No one knew the trails. That was the point. His hand moved to the revolver on his hip. 7 years without firing at a man, but the instinct remained. The rider appeared around the bend, a young man in a Union Pacific coat, leading a tired mare. When he spotted Matthew, the messenger's hand reflexively moved toward his own weapon, then stopped. "Matthew Crowder?" the young man called, keeping his distance. Matthew didn't answer, didn't move. "Got a letter for you." The messenger reached slowly into his saddlebag, producing an envelope with a black border, a death notice. "From Judge Miller in Pikes Creek." Matthew's jaw tightened. "You've got the wrong man. Tall fellow, beard, lives alone on Pikes Ridge, former Union lieutenant." The messenger shrugged. "Sounds right to me." Matthew stood, blood-soaked hands dripping onto the mountain soil. "How'd you find me?" "Judge Miller hired trackers. Took him 3 weeks." The messenger extended the letter. Said it was urgent. Matthew made no move to take it. The mountains had been his sanctuary, his escape from the memories that haunted him. The letter threatened all of that. "I don't want it," he said. The messenger dismounted, approaching cautiously. "Sir, with respect, Judge Miller said it concerns your brother's children." Matthew went still. James. His brother's face flashed before him, smiling, confident. Everything Matthew wasn't. "James is dead," Matthew said flatly. "Has been for years." "Yes, sir, but his wife Rebecca passed last month. Consumption? The children?" The messenger trailed off, still offering the letter. Matthew stared at the envelope. 7 years he'd spent building walls between himself and the world below. 7 years of silence, of forgetting. But some bonds couldn't be severed, no matter how much mountain stood between them. He took the letter with bloody hands. The interior of Matthew's cabin was sparse but orderly. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, rifle rack above it, a small table and chair, a narrow bed, shelves of preserved meat and berries. The only personal touches were a wooden chest at the foot of the bed and a faded daguerreotype on the mantel. 2 men in Union blue, arms around each other's shoulders. Matthew broke the wax seal on the letter, his hands now clean but still trembling slightly. October 3rd, 1875. "Mr. Crowder, it is with profound regret that I inform you of the passing of Mrs. Rebecca Crowder on September 21st. The consumption took her quickly and mercifully. She leaves behind 3 children, Thomas, 10, June 7, and Macy, 4. I write to you as their legal guardian, as stipulated in your brother's will. The children currently reside with Mrs. Anna Ward, who claims to have married your brother shortly before his death 8 months ago, though documentation is incomplete. There is also the matter of your brother's property, 320 acres, including mineral rights that have attracted considerable interest. Mr. Daniel Prescott, owner of Pikes Creek Mining Company, has filed for guardianship of the children, citing business dealings with your late brother and concern for their welfare. Your presence is urgently required in Pikes Creek to resolve these matters. The hearing is scheduled for October 20th. Respectfully, Judge Howard Miller." Matthew read it twice, then crumpled the paper in his fist. He crossed to the fire and held it over the flames, but couldn't bring himself to let go. "Damn you, James," he whispered. He moved to the wooden chest, unlocking it with a key from around his neck. Inside lay the remnants of his former life. Union jacket with lieutenant's bars, a Bible, letters from his mother, and a leather folder containing papers. He extracted a folded document, yellow with age. His brother's will, delivered to him before Matthew had fled to the mountains. He'd never opened it. Now, with shaking hands, he broke the seal. To my brother Matthew, should I not return from this war? Matthew slammed it shut. He couldn't. Not now. He paced the cabin, mind racing. James had a new wife? Children without parents? Prescott trying to steal it all? Not my problem, he muttered. Not my fight. He grabbed his axe and stormed outside, splitting wood with furious strokes until sweat poured down his face despite the mountain chill. Each strike echoed his thoughts. Not my problem. But as darkness fell, Matthew found himself still sitting on the chopping block, staring at the folded will in his hands. Finally, he opened it fully, reading by the last light of day. To my brother Matthew, should I not return from this war, I leave to you guardianship of my children and stewardship of our family land. The 320 acres passed down from our father contains more value than appears to the eye. The enclosed map shows what I've discovered, enough to secure our family's future for generations. I know you carry burdens I cannot see. I know the war has marked us both. But remember what Father taught us. Honor, family, land. These are what remain when all else falls away. Your loving brother James Matthew unfolded the small map tucked within the will. It showed the Crowder property with markings in James's neat hand, a vein of gold running beneath the eastern ridge. Inside the envelope was one more item, his brother's captain's insignia, engraved on the back. Honor, family, land. Matthew closed his eyes, memories washing over him like a flood. Gettysburg, 1863. The smell of gunpowder and blood. James lying on a field hospital cot, gripping Matthew's hand. If I don't make it, promise me you'll go home. Take care of my family. Keep our land safe. You'll make it, Matthew had insisted. We both will. But only one Crowder brother had kept that promise. James recovered from his wounds, returned to the fight. Matthew broke after Wilderness, deserting not just the army, but his promises, his family, everything. By the time he learned James had died of complications from his old wounds, Matthew was already hiding in the mountains, a coward who couldn't face what the war had made him. He tucked the insignia into his pocket and stood. Dawn would come soon. Decisions had to be made. The messenger was asleep in his bedroll when Matthew emerged from the cabin, pack slung over one shoulder, rifle in hand. We leave at first light, Matthew said, startling the young man awake. You're coming down then? To Pike's Creek? Matthew adjusted the revolver on his hip, just long enough to settle my brother's affairs. As the messenger prepared his horse, he asked, How long have you been up here alone, Mr. Crowder? 7 years, 2 months, 18 days. That's precise. Matthew's face remained impassive. A man should know exactly what he's running from. As they rode away from the cabin, neither noticed the figure watching from the tree line. A man in a dark coat who picked up a shell casing Matthew had dropped, turning it in his fingers. Finally, the man whispered, Crowder comes down from his mountain. Pike's Creek had grown in Matthew's absence. What had been a struggling mining camp was now a proper town with a train station, hotel, and even a brick courthouse. The Crowder and Sons blacksmith shop still stood, though the sign was weathered and the name of the new owner, Hargreaves, had been painted below. People stared as Matthew rode past. He made quite a sight, buckskins instead of proper clothes, long beard, rifle across his saddle, a mountain man returning to civilization. Matthew Crowder, a voice called. Lord above, I thought you died up in them mountains. An elderly woman stood in the doorway of the general store, wiping her hands on her apron. Mrs. Tillman, Matthew nodded, recognition slow in coming. 7 years without a word. Your poor brother waited for you, you know, every day looking up at that mountain. Matthew's jaw tightened. I need to see Judge Miller. Courthouse. She pointed down the street. You're late, boy. Too late for a lot of things. The courthouse was new but built in the same Greek revival style as those back east. Columns, portico, a statement that civilization had reached the frontier. Inside, a clerk directed Matthew to Judge Miller's chambers. The judge was older than Matthew remembered, at least 65 now, with a shock of white hair and wire spectacles. He looked up from his desk, surprise crossing his features. Matthew Crowder, you got my letter. Yesterday. Matthew remained standing, hat in hand. What's this about my brother's children? Judge Miller removed his spectacles. Sit down, son. This is complicated. Matthew reluctantly took a seat. Your brother James died 8 months ago. Complications from his war wound, they say. He left behind 3 children and considerable property. 320 acres, including water rights and mineral claims. And this new wife, Anna Ward, claims they married 4 months before his death. She was his nurse, apparently. Seems devoted to the children, but there's no record of the marriage in county files. And Prescott? What's his interest? Judge Miller's expression darkened. Daniel Prescott owns most of the mines around Pikes Creek now. Says James owed him money, substantial amounts. He's filed for guardianship of the children and control of their property until they come of age. Which would be when? 21 for Thomas, 14 years. Matthew understood immediately. 14 years of Prescott controlling the gold vein. By the time Thomas came of age, there'd be nothing left. The children need a guardian, Matthew. You're named in the will, but you've been gone 7 years. And Prescott has influence. The hearing's in 2 days. Matthew stood. I need to see them, the children. They're at James' place, the Crowder homestead about 2 miles east. Judge Miller hesitated. Matthew, be careful with Prescott. He owns half this town, bank, hotel, most of the businesses. Even the sheriff's in his pocket. Not you? The judge smiled thinly. I'm too old to be bought, and too close to meeting my maker to start compromising now. The Crowder homestead hadn't changed much. A sturdy 2-story cabin with a barn and corral nestled against the eastern ridge. The land looked well-tended, with a vegetable garden and fruit trees James had planted years ago now mature and bearing. Matthew approached slowly, suddenly unsure. What would he say to these children? To this woman claiming to be James's wife? Before he could knock, the door opened. A woman stood there, shotgun in hand, pointed at his chest. She was younger than he expected, perhaps 30, with blonde hair pulled back severely and striking blue eyes. Despite the weapon, there was a grace to her bearing. You must be Matthew, she said, not lowering the gun. 7 years too late. Mrs. Ward? Just Anna is fine. She assessed him with a cool gaze. You look like him. Same eyes. From behind her emerged a boy of about 10, tall for his age, with James's serious expression and their mother's dark hair. He stared at Matthew with undisguised suspicion. Are you really our uncle? The boy asked. Matthew nodded. I am. You must be Thomas. The boy didn't smile. Father said you were a war hero, said you were the best shot in the Union Army. Your father was being kind. Matthew shifted uncomfortably. May I come in? Anna finally lowered the shotgun. I suppose you'd better. Children, she called over her shoulder, come meet your Uncle Matthew. Inside, the cabin was modest but comfortable. A fire burned in the hearth, and the smell of stew filled the air. 2 more children appeared, a solemn girl of 7 with braided hair who clutched a notebook to her chest, and a small red-headed girl of 4 who hid behind Anna's skirts. This is June, Anna said, gesturing to the older girl. She doesn't speak much, but she hears everything. The girl nodded in acknowledgement. And this, Anna continued, gently bringing the smallest child forward, is Macy. The little girl stared up at Matthew with wide eyes. Are you the uncle from the mountain that Papa told stories about? Matthew knelt to her level. I suppose I am. Papa said you fought bears and lived in a cave. Despite himself, Matthew's lips twitched. Not quite. I have a cabin, and I try to avoid bears when possible. Do you have a beard because you're sad? Papa grew his beard when Mama died. Macy, Anna chided gently. That's enough questions for now. Go help June set the table. As the children moved away, Anna's expression hardened. They've lost enough, Mr. Crowder. If you're here just to disappear again, I suggest you leave now before they get attached. I'm here because of Judge Miller's letter and because of James's will. Ah, yes, the will, where you're named guardian despite being missing for years. Her tone was bitter. Do you even want them? Matthew hesitated. They're my brother's children. That's not what I asked. Before Matthew could respond, Thomas reappeared. I've set the table, Anna. Will he be staying for supper? Anna looked at Matthew questioningly. If there's enough, Matthew said. There's always enough, Anna replied. James taught me to cook for an army. During the meal, Matthew learned more about his brother's final years. After recovering from his war wound, James had returned to Pikes Creek, rebuilt the family blacksmith business, and married Rebecca, who died of consumption shortly after Macy's birth. They'd taken in two orphans, Thomas and June, whose parents had died in a mining accident. "And how did you meet my brother?" Matthew asked Anna. "I was a nurse in Denver. James came for treatments when his wound flared up again last year. We married 4 months before he died." Her voice softened. "It was brief, but it was good. Yet there's no record of the marriage." Anna's eyes flashed. "We were married by a traveling preacher. The paperwork was to be filed in Denver, but..." She shrugged. "I have letters from James addressing me as his wife. That should be enough." "Not for the law, apparently." "No, oh well." Her gaze hardened. "Not for the law and not for Daniel Prescott, who seems determined to take everything James built." Matthew was about to ask more when a knock came at the door. Anna tensed, reaching for the shotgun leaning against the wall. "Who is it?" she called. "Billy Tanner, ma'am, from the mine." Anna opened the door cautiously. A young miner stood there, hat in hands. "Mr. Prescott would like to see you, Mrs. Ward. Tonight." Anna's face paled slightly. "Tell Mr. Prescott I'll come by his office tomorrow morning." "He was quite insistent, ma'am, said it was urgent." "Tomorrow," Anna repeated firmly, closing the door. She turned to Matthew, her composure cracking slightly. "Daniel Prescott doesn't just want the land, Mr. Crowder. He wants me, and he's a dangerous man to refuse." Matthew spent the night in the barn, unable to sleep in his brother's house, in his brother's bed. The hay was clean, and he'd slept in far worse conditions. He was awakened before dawn by the barn door creaking open. Instinctively, his hand went to the revolver beside him. "It's just me," came a boy's voice. Thomas stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the gray dawn. Matthew sat up. "You're up early." Thomas approached, and Matthew saw he was holding something. Matthew's rifle, which he'd left leaning against the wall. "This is a Sharps Model 1859, the boy said. "Father had one too, said it was the most accurate rifle ever made." "Your father was right," Matthew said cautiously. "That's a loaded weapon, Thomas." "I know," the boy examined the rifle with surprising competence. "Father taught me how to handle guns, said a man should know how to protect his family." Matthew stood slowly. "May I have it back?" Thomas handed it over without hesitation. "I needed to see if you knew what you were doing, if you could protect us." "From Prescott?" Thomas nodded grimly. "He came after Father died, said we owed him money, said he'd take care of us if Anna married him." The boy's eyes hardened. "Father told me never to trust him, said he was a snake who'd stolen from honest miners. Your father was a good judge of character. He also said you were the best man he ever knew." Thomas's gaze was challenging. "Was he right about that too?" Matthew looked away. "Your father always saw the best in people, even when it wasn't there. He waited for you. Every day he'd look up at the mountain, said someday you'd come down and teach me to shoot like you." The words cut Matthew deeper than any knife. "I'm sorry I wasn't here, Thomas." "Are you staying now?" Matthew hesitated. "I don't know." Thomas nodded as if confirming something to himself. "That's what I thought." He turned to leave, then stopped. "We're going to Father's grave this morning. You should come." The cemetery lay on a gentle hill overlooking the town. Two fresh graves stood side by side, James and Rebecca Crowder. Matthew knelt between them, removing his hat. Thomas stood beside him, straight-backed and solemn. "I come every Sunday, tell them how we're doing." Matthew traced his brother's name on the simple marker. For the first time in years, he felt tears threatening. "I should have been here." "Yes," Thomas said simply. "You should have." They stood in silence as the morning sun crested the mountains, painting the valley gold. "Your father was the best of us," Matthew finally said. "Brave, honest, loyal, everything I wasn't. He said you were haunted, that the war took something from you that you went to the mountain to find." Matthew looked at the boy in surprise. "He said that?" Thomas nodded. "Did you find it, what you were looking for?" Matthew looked back at the grave. "No, I was just hiding." They walked back to town in silence, but somehow easier than before. As they passed the general store, the owner, Mrs. Tillman, called out to them, "Matthew Crowder and young Thomas, come in, come in." Inside, she fussed over them both. "Lord Matthew, you need proper clothes. Can't go around looking like a mountain man if you're staying." I'm not sure I am staying, Mrs. Tillman. Nonsense. Those children need you. She began pulling items from shelves, shirts, pants, socks, and you need a shave and a haircut before the hearing. How does everyone know about the hearing? Mrs. Tillman snorted. Small town, and Prescott's been talking about it for weeks. How he'll be taking care of poor James's orphans. She lowered her voice. Be careful, Matthew. Prescott's not just after the land. Word is there's gold on the Crowder property, and Anna's already refused him twice. As they left the store with supplies, a well-dressed man blocked their path. He was perhaps 45, with a neatly trimmed beard and expensive suit. A gold watch chain gleamed across his vest. Matthew Crowder, the man said, extending his hand. Daniel Prescott. I'd heard rumors you'd come down from your mountain. Matthew didn't take the offered hand. Prescott. Prescott smiled thinly, lowering his hand. Such hostility. And here I thought we might discuss your brother's affairs like gentlemen. There's nothing to discuss. James left his children and property to me. Ah, but there's the matter of his debts. Substantial debts, I'm afraid. Your brother borrowed heavily to expand his operations. What operations? Prescott's eyebrows rose. You don't know? James was developing a mine on your family property. Quite promising, from what I understand. He glanced at Thomas. The boy looks like him, doesn't he? Same stubborn jaw. His tone hardened slightly. Let's hope he doesn't share his father's unrealistic expectations. Is that a threat, Prescott? Not at all, merely an observation. Prescott tipped his hat. I look forward to seeing you at the hearing, Crowder. I'm sure Judge Miller will make the right decision for the children's future. As Prescott walked away, Thomas spoke quietly. I don't like him. Smart boy, Matthew replied. When they returned to the homestead, they found the front door standing open. Inside, Anna was picking up broken dishes while June huddled with Macy in the corner. What happened? Matthew demanded. Anna straightened, her face tight with anger. Someone was here. They went through everything, James's papers, the deed box, even the children's rooms. Prescott's men? Who else? She held up a sheet of paper. They left this. Matthew took it, reading the crude message. The map or the land? Your choice, Crowder. What map? Anna asked. Matthew exchanged glances with Thomas. I think I know. That night, after the children were asleep, Matthew and Anna sat at the kitchen table speaking in low voices. A single oil lamp cast their shadows long against the cabin walls. James sent me a map, Matthew explained, unfolding the yellowed paper. With his will, before I left. Anna studied it, her finger tracing the thin line marking the gold vein. So it's true, James found gold. Apparently, though he never mentioned it in his letters. What few letters you answered, Anna said, pointedly. Then, seeing Matthew's expression, she softened. I'm sorry, that wasn't fair. It was fair enough. Matthew studied the map more closely. The vein runs under the eastern ridge, far from the main creek where most miners would look. James was clever. He wanted to protect it, for the children. Anna looked up, her blue eyes catching the lamplight. He began working it secretly, just enough to pay off debts and keep the family comfortable. But Prescott suspected. He kept raising James's equipment costs, charging processing fees for the ore. James refused to sell the land, so she trailed off, looking away. You think Prescott had something to do with my brother's death? Matthew asked quietly. Anna's hands trembled slightly. James's wound had healed years ago. Then suddenly it flared up after he argued with Prescott. He died within a month. That's a serious accusation. I was a nurse, Mr. Crowder. I've seen men die from old wounds. It doesn't happen like that. She stared into the lamp flame. But I can't prove anything. And in this town, suspicions against Daniel Prescott might as well be whispered to the wind. Matthew folded the map. Why did Prescott want you to marry him? Surely not for love. Anna's laugh was bitter. Love, no. Control. If he married James's widow, he could claim guardianship of the children, control the property until they came of age. She met Matthew's gaze evenly. I would rather die than let that happen. Yet you married my brother after knowing him only a few months. A flash of anger crossed her face. You think I married James for his property? For his gold? I don't know what to think. You appear out of nowhere, marry my dying brother, then stay to raise his children. Children who aren't even yours by blood. Anna stood abruptly. I loved your brother, Mr. Crowder. Perhaps not with the passion of youth, but with the understanding that comes from seeing a good man suffering. He was kind to me when few were. Her voice caught. And those children? I've wiped their tears, tended their fevers, held them through nightmares. Blood or not, they are mine now. Matthew studied her, the proud tilt of her chin, the fierce protectiveness in her eyes. Whatever her initial motives, her love for the children was genuine. I'm sorry, he said finally. I'm not good at trust. Neither am I. She sat back down. But we need to trust each other now, for their sake. Matthew nodded slowly. Prescott will keep coming. The map, the land, the gold. He won't stop. What will you do? Matthew hesitated. The mountain called to him. Its silence, its simplicity. He could return there, leave all this behind. But James's voice echoed in his mind. Honor, family, land. I don't know how to be what they need, he admitted. I'm no father. Anna studied him. Then learn. Thomas needs a man to show him how to be strong without being hard. June needs patience. She hasn't spoken more than a dozen words since her parents died. And Macy, her expression softened. Macy just needs someone who won't leave. And what do you need, Mrs. Ward? She looked surprised by the question. I need to keep my promise to James, to protect his children, and to keep Prescott from stealing what belongs to them. That doesn't answer my question. Anna stood, gathering the empty cups. It's late, Mr. Crowder. There's a room prepared for you upstairs. The hearing is day after tomorrow. You should rest. As she turned to leave, Matthew spoke again. Anna, why did Prescott really want to see you tonight? She paused, her back to him. To threaten me, to remind me that a woman alone has few options in a town like this. Her voice hardened. But I am not alone anymore. Am I, Mr. Crowder? No, Matthew said. You're not. Shame. The next morning, Matthew woke to find Thomas sitting on the porch, whittling a piece of wood with surprising skill. You're up early, Matthew observed, settling beside him. Thomas shrugged. Chores won't do themselves. What are you making? The boy held up the half-finished carving, a horse taking shape from the pine. For Macy, her birthday's next week. Matthew nodded appreciatively. Your father taught you? Some, I watched mostly. Thomas continued working, his small hands surprisingly steady with the knife. Are you staying after the hearing? The question caught Matthew off guard. I haven't decided. Thomas nodded, unsurprised. Anna says you might go back to your mountain. It's peaceful there. Is that why you left? For peace? Matthew considered how to answer. I left because after the war I couldn't be around people anymore. Couldn't sleep without seeing faces. Couldn't talk without hearing screams. He looked at his hands. Your father understood. He came back whole. I came back broken. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Father said the war took pieces of every man who fought. Some lost arms or legs. Some lost their minds. Some lost their souls. He looked up at Matthew. What did you lose, Uncle? Matthew met the boy's steady gaze. My courage, I think. But you're not afraid of Prescott. A humorless smile touched Matthew's lips. I'm not afraid of dying, Thomas. I'm afraid of failing. Again. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a wagon approaching. Matthew's hand instinctively moved to his hip, where his revolver hung. The wagon stopped before the house. The driver was Sheriff Pike, a barrel-chested man with a drooping mustache and deputy star. Beside him sat a thin man in an expensive suit whom Matthew didn't recognize. Morning, Crowder, Pike called. This here's Mr. Simmons, attorney for Mr. Prescott. Got some papers for you. Matthew descended the porch steps, Thomas following close behind. What papers? Simmons produced an official-looking document. Eviction notice, Mr. Crowder. By order of Judge Miller, Mrs. Anna Ward is to vacate these premises immediately, as she has no legal claim to the property. That's impossible, Matthew growled. The hearing isn't until tomorrow. This is a separate matter, Simmons explained with practiced patience. While guardianship of the children will be determined tomorrow, Mrs. Ward's residency is a simpler legal question. Without proof of marriage, she has no right to remain in the Crowder home. The front door opened and Anna appeared, June and Macy behind her. What's happening? Sheriff Pike removed his hat. Sorry, Mrs. Ward. Court order. You need to pack your things. Anna's face drained of color. Now, where are we supposed to go? Mr. Prescott has generously offered accommodations at the Pikes Creek Hotel, Simmons said smoothly, for you and the children, until matters are settled. Matthew stepped forward. The children stay here, with me. I'm their legal guardian until the court says otherwise. Simmons's smile was thin. Of course, Mr. Crowder. The children may remain with you. Mrs. Ward, however, must leave. This is absurd, Anna protested. The children need me. The law is clear, ma'am, Sheriff Pike said, looking uncomfortable. Mr. Simmons has the court order signed by Judge Miller himself. Matthew examined the document. The judge's signature was there, along with the official seal. This is Prescott's doing, he muttered. Mr. Prescott is simply concerned about the welfare of his late business partner's children, Simmons replied. A strange woman with no legal ties. She's not a strange woman, Matthew interrupted. She's their mother in every way that matters. Not in the eyes of the law, Simmons insisted. Unless she can produce a marriage certificate by tomorrow's hearing, she has no standing. Matthew looked at Anna, saw the fear behind her brave face, saw Macy clinging to her skirts, June's wide eyes. He made a decision. She doesn't need a marriage certificate, he said firmly, because she's staying as my wife. A stunned silence followed his declaration. Anna stared at him. Thomas's eyebrows shot up. Even Sheriff Pike seemed taken aback. Your wife? Simmons stammered. We were married this morning, Matthew lied smoothly, by Reverend Wilson at first light. The paperwork will be filed today. Simmons's face reddened. This is preposterous. A transparent attempt to circumvent the law. Is it against the law for a man to marry his brother's widow? Matthew challenged. To provide a home for his nieces and nephew? I think Judge Miller will find our arrangement perfectly legal and proper. Sheriff Pike rubbed his mustache, clearly uncertain. Well now, Mr. Simmons, if they're married, they are not married, Simmons sputtered. This is a fabrication. Then we'll see you at the hearing tomorrow, Matthew said firmly, where my wife and I will present our case for guardianship together. After a tense moment, Simmons gathered himself. Very well, but Mr. Prescott will not be pleased with this development. Mr. Prescott's pleasure is not my concern, Matthew replied. As the wagon departed, Anna turned to Matthew, her expression unreadable. Your wife? It was the first solution that came to mind. You do realize we'd actually have to get married for that to work? Her tone was incredulous. Today? Yes. Just like that, a marriage of convenience to thwart Prescott? Matthew met her gaze steadily. Those children need both of us. This is the simplest way to ensure that happens. Anna shook her head in disbelief. You're as impulsive as your brother. Is that a yes? She studied him for a long moment. I need to think. Inside, while Anna spoke with the children, Matthew paced the kitchen. What had he done? Proposed marriage to a woman he barely knew? Committed himself to a family? To responsibilities he'd spent years running from? But watching Prescott's schemes unfold, seeing the fear in the children's eyes, something had broken loose inside him. The protective instinct he thought long dead had flared to life. The back door opened and Thomas entered, his expression serious. Anna told us, he said, about you marrying her. Matthew braced himself. I know it's sudden. Thomas shrugged. Makes sense to me. You need to protect us from Prescott. This is the best way. You're not upset? Why would I be? Your father's brother. Anna needs a husband. We need a father. His logic was implacable. Will you teach me to shoot like you? Father promised, but never had the chance. The boy's acceptance was both touching and unnerving. If we stay, yes. When, Thomas corrected. When we stay. Anna appeared in the doorway, having changed into a simple blue dress, her hair neatly arranged. The children and I have talked. If this is what it takes to keep them safe, then I accept your proposal, Mr. Crowder. Matthew, and he corrected. If we're to be married, you should use my name. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Matthew, then, we should go now, before Prescott can interfere further. Anna nodded, turning to the children. June, help Macy with her coat. Thomas, hitch up the wagon. As they prepared to leave, Matthew noticed June watching him, her solemn eyes assessing. She approached slowly, offering him a folded piece of paper. He opened it to find a drawing, crude but recognizable, of 5 figures holding hands in front of a house. A family. "Is this us?" Matthew asked gently. June nodded, then to his surprise, spoke in a soft voice. "Safe. I hear you." The church was small but well-maintained, with simple stained glass windows casting colored light across the wooden pews. Reverend Wilson, a kindly man in his 60s, seemed unsurprised by their request. "James spoke often of you," he told Matthew. "Said you'd come down from that mountain someday when you were ready." "This isn't exactly how I planned it," Matthew admitted. The Reverend smiled. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, son." The ceremony was brief and without flourish. Thomas stood as witness, proudly holding his father's Bible. June and Macy watched wide-eyed as Matthew and Anna exchanged simple vows. No rings were exchanged. There had been no time to purchase them. "By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Wilson concluded. "You may kiss your bride." Matthew hesitated, suddenly awkward. Anna solved the dilemma by leaning forward and placing a chaste kiss on his cheek. "That will do for now," she whispered. Macy clapped her hands in delight. "Does this mean we call you Pa now?" Matthew froze, unprepared for the question. Anna answered smoothly, "We'll figure that out as we go, sweetheart." As they signed the marriage certificate, Reverend Wilson lowered his voice. "Prescott's been asking questions about you, Matthew, about your time away. Be careful." "What kind of questions?" "About your state of mind, whether you're fit to raise children." The Reverend's expression was grave. "He's building a case against you." Matthew's jaw tightened. Let him try. They left the church to find a small crowd had gathered outside, townsfolk curious about the sudden wedding. Among them stood Mrs. Tillman, beaming. "I knew you'd do right by those children," she declared, embracing Anna. "And high time someone stood up to Daniel Prescott." Others offered congratulations, though some faces remained reserved, wary. Pikes Creek was a town divided in its loyalties. As they prepared to leave, Matthew noticed a familiar figure watching from across the street. Daniel Prescott, his expression thunderous. Beside him stood Simmons, whispering urgently in his ear. "We've made an enemy today," Anna murmured, following Matthew's gaze. "He was already our enemy," Matthew replied. "Now he knows we'll fight back." News of the wedding spread through Pikes Creek like wildfire. By evening, it seemed everyone knew that Matthew Crowder had returned from the mountains to marry his brother's widow and claim guardianship of the children. Judge Miller sent a note confirming that tomorrow's hearing would proceed as scheduled, but with the new development of their marriage to be considered. "Be prepared," he warned. "Prescott will not yield easily." After supper, with the children finally asleep, Matthew and Anna sat before the fire, planning their strategy for the hearing. "Prescott will question the legitimacy of our marriage," Anna said. "Call it what it is, a convenient arrangement." "It is legitimate," Matthew insisted. "We said the vows, signed the certificate, but not for the usual reasons." "Does that matter? Many marriages begin as arrangements, especially out here." Anna studied him in the firelight. "You surprise me, Matthew Crowder. I expected a bitter hermit. Instead, I find a man of unexpected principle." "Don't mistake desperation for principle," he said wryly. "I'm making this up as I go." "Aren't we all?" She smiled slightly, then grew serious. "We should discuss arrangements. This is your brother's house, but I've been running it for months. The children have routines, expectations. I don't intend to disrupt their lives more than necessary." "And our marriage?" Anna asked delicately. "We should be clear about expectations." Matthew shifted uncomfortably. "I hadn't thought that far ahead. Daisha." "Clearly," her tone was dry, "I propose we present ourselves as a proper husband and wife in public, for the children's sake, and to maintain our legal standing. In private, we will be partners in raising the children. Nothing more." "Agreed." Matthew hesitated, then added, "I've been alone a long time, Anna. I'm not good with people anymore. With family." "Then it's fortunate you have 3 children to remind you," she replied. "They'll give you no choice but to remember." A comfortable silence fell between them. For the first time since coming down the mountain, Matthew felt the knot in his chest loosen slightly. Perhaps this arrangement could work after all. The moment was shattered by the sound of breaking glass. Matthew was on his feet instantly, revolver drawn, Anna grabbed the shotgun from above the fireplace. "Stay here," Matthew ordered, moving cautiously toward the front of the house. In the parlor, he found a rock had been thrown through the window, wrapped in a piece of paper. He unfolded it by the light of his lamp. "Marriage won't save you, Crowder. A crazy man can't keep children or gold." He crumpled the note in his fist, scanning the darkness outside. Nothing moved, but he could feel eyes watching from the shadows. Anna appeared beside him, shotgun ready. "What is it?" "A warning from Prescott." He showed her the note. Her face paled. "Crazy man? He's trying to use my time away against me, suggesting I'm unstable." "Are you?" Her question was direct, without judgment. Matthew considered before answering. "I went to the mountains because I couldn't bear to be around people. Couldn't sleep without nightmares. Couldn't live with what I'd seen, what I'd done." He met her gaze. "But I'm not crazy, just damaged, like a lot of men who came back from that war." Anna nodded slowly. "Then we'll face them together tomorrow, and they'll see a man who may be damaged, but is strong enough to stand for his family." The word family hung between them, foreign yet strangely right. A small voice came from the stairs. "Anna, I heard a noise." Macy stood there in her nightgown, clutching a rag doll. Her eyes widened at the sight of the broken window. "It's nothing to worry about, sweetheart," Anna soothed, setting aside the shotgun. "Just an accident. Go back to bed." "I can't sleep," the little girl said. "Can you tell me a story?" Anna glanced at Matthew, who nodded. "Go ahead, I'll clean this up." As Anna led Macy back upstairs, Matthew gathered the broken glass, mind racing. Prescott was escalating, moving from legal maneuvers to intimidation. What would come next? He boarded up the window, then checked every door and window in the house, setting simple alarms, tin cans on strings that would rattle if disturbed. Finally, he settled in a chair by the front door, rifle across his lap. He wouldn't sleep tonight. Tomorrow would determine everything: the children's future, the fate of the land, the gold that lay beneath it. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a question persisted when it was over. Would he return to his mountain or stay with this unexpected family he'd inherited? The first light of dawn found Matthew still in his vigil. Anna descended the stairs, dressed for the hearing in her best dress, navy blue with a lace collar. "You didn't sleep," she observed. "Didn't want any more surprises." She nodded, understanding. "The children are dressing. We should leave soon." "Anna," Matthew stood, setting aside his rifle. "Whatever happens today, I'll stand by what we agreed. I won't abandon the children to Prescott." Something softened in her expression. "I believe you, Matthew." She hesitated, then added, "James was right about you. There is good in you, buried beneath all that mountain dirt and stubbornness." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not too deeply buried, I hope." The tender moment was interrupted by the children coming downstairs, dressed in their Sunday best. Thomas looked uncomfortable in his collar, June solemn in her pinafore, and Macy bright in yellow ribbons. "Are we going to church again?" Macy asked. "No, sweetheart," Anna replied. "We're going to see Judge Miller. Remember what we talked about? About staying together as a family?" Macy nodded seriously. "Because the bad man wants to take us away." "No one is taking you anywhere," Matthew said firmly. "I promise." As they prepared to leave, a rider approached the house at a gallop. Matthew tensed, hand dropping to his revolver, but it was only a boy from town. Billy, the same young miner who had delivered Prescott's message. "Mr. Crowder," the boy called, dismounting. "Urgent message from Judge Miller." Matthew took the folded note and read it quickly, his expression darkening. "What is it?" Anna asked. "The hearing's been moved up, 9 o'clock instead of noon." He checked his pocket watch. "That's less than an hour." "Prescott," Anna guessed. "He's trying to catch us unprepared." "It won't work," Matthew said grimly. "We'll be ready." They hurried to hitch the wagon, the children sensing the tension. As they prepared to leave, Matthew noticed Thomas lagging behind. "Thomas, we need to go." The boy emerged from the barn, something clutched in his hand. "I almost forgot. Father wanted you to have this." He held out a small object, a silver pocket watch. Matthew took it, recognizing it immediately. Their father's watch passed to James when the old man died. "Your father gave this to you," Matthew said. "You should keep it." Thomas shook his head. "He told me before he died, When your uncle comes down from the mountain, give him this. Tell him it's time. Matthew opened the watch. Inside the cover was inscribed, honor, family, land. The same words engraved on James's captain's insignia, the Crowder family creed. Thank you, Thomas, Matthew said, his voice rough with emotion. He tucked the watch into his vest pocket. Your father was right. It is time. As they rode toward town, the mountains loomed behind them, silent sentinels watching as Matthew Crowder, the man who had fled to their heights, now descended to fight for what his brother had left behind. The courthouse was crowded when they arrived, the benches filled with townspeople eager to witness the drama. At the front of the room, Judge Miller sat behind his bench, looking grave. To one side sat Daniel Prescott with his attorney Simmons, both in expensive suits, expressions confident. As Matthew and Anna entered with the children, a hush fell over the room. They made their way to the empty table on the left side of the courtroom. All rise, the clerk announced. This hearing is now in session. The Honorable Judge Howard Miller presiding in the matter of guardianship for the minor children of James Crowder, deceased. Judge Miller surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on Matthew and Anna. I see we have some new developments since this hearing was scheduled. Mr. Simmons, you may present your client's case. Simmons rose smoothly. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Daniel Prescott, seeks guardianship of the Crowder children based on his close business relationship with the late James Crowder, who owed my client considerable sums. Prescott is willing to forgive these debts in exchange for guardianship and management of the children's inheritance until they come of age. And what evidence do you have of these debts? Judge Miller asked. Simmons produced several documents, promissory notes signed by James Crowder, totaling over $5,000 for equipment and processing services. The amount drew murmurs from the crowd. It was a small fortune in Pikes Creek. Furthermore, Simmons continued, we challenge the fitness of Matthew Crowder as guardian. Mr. Crowder abandoned his family 7 years ago, living as a hermit in the mountains, suffering from what many believe to be war melancholia and possible derangement. More murmurs, some sympathetic, others condemning. And we also challenge the validity of his hasty marriage to Mrs. Ward, clearly arranged solely to circumvent your previous ruling regarding her residency. Judge Miller nodded thoughtfully. Serious allegations. Mr. Crowder, do you have representation? Matthew stood. No, Your Honor, just myself and the truth. Very well. Present your case. Matthew approached the bench, keenly aware of every eye upon him. Your Honor, I won't deny I left Pikes Creek after the war. I was broken in ways that aren't visible. Many veterans are. He looked around the courtroom, noting several men nodding in understanding. But I never abandoned my brother or his family. We corresponded, and before his death, James named me guardian of his children in his will. He produced the document. As for my marriage to Anna, it may be sudden, but it's genuine. We both love these children and want to protect them. And the debts? Judge Miller asked. Can you address those? Matthew hesitated. This was dangerous territory. If he revealed the gold vein, Prescott would have even more reason to pursue the land. If he didn't, the debt claim stood unchallenged. Your Honor, he said carefully, I believe many of those promissory notes are fraudulent. My brother mentioned Prescott's unfair business practices in his letters, and I have reason to believe Prescott may have been involved in my brother's death. Gasps filled the courtroom. Prescott shot to his feet. This is slander. Outrageous. Order, Delroy. Judge Miller banged his gavel. Mr. Crowder, that's a serious accusation without evidence. I have evidence, Your Honor, came a new voice from the back of the courtroom. All heads turned to see a tall, distinguished man in his 50s, wearing a black suit and an unmistakable badge, a U.S. Marshal's star. Marshal Robert Hayes, Your Honor. I've been investigating Mr. Prescott's business dealings for some time, including his relationship with James Crowder. Prescott's face drained of color. This is irregular, Your Honor. We weren't notified of federal involvement. Judge Miller's eyebrows rose. I'm rather interested in what the Marshal has to say, Mr. Prescott. Marshal Hayes, please approach. As Hayes moved forward, Matthew noticed a subtle movement from Prescott. A nod to someone at the back of the room. A silent signal. The sound of a gunshot shattered the courtroom's tense atmosphere. Chaos erupted in the courtroom. Women screamed, men ducked for cover, and Judge Miller shouted for order as his gavel pounded frantically against the bench. Matthew's instincts took over. He grabbed Anna and pulled her to the floor, shielding the children with his body as his eyes scanned for the shooter. Marshall Hayes staggered, a crimson stain spreading across his chest. He fell to one knee, drawing his revolver with remarkable steadiness despite his wound. "Armed man, back door!" he shouted. Sheriff Pike finally sprang into action, drawing his own weapon and racing toward the rear of the courtroom. Two deputies followed, pushing through the panicking crowd. Matthew spotted a figure in a dark coat slipping out a side door. "Anna, stay with the children," he ordered, then sprinted after the shooter. Outside, he caught a glimpse of the man rounding the corner of the courthouse. Matthew gave chase, his long legs eating up the distance. The shooter fired blindly over his shoulder, the bullet splintering wood from the corner of a building as Matthew ducked. The chase led down an alley between the general store and the saloon. The shooter was fast, but Matthew was faster, fueled by rage and 7 years of mountain living. He tackled the man from behind, sending them both crashing into a pile of empty crates. They rolled in the dirt, fighting for control. The shooter, a rough-looking man with a scar across his chin, fought with the desperation of someone who knew the penalty for shooting a federal marshal. He managed to slam his pistol butt against Matthew's temple, momentarily stunning him. As the shooter scrambled to his feet, a shot rang out. The man screamed, dropping to his knees as blood spurted from his thigh. Thomas stood at the end of the alley, Matthew's revolver still smoking in his hands, his young face set in grim determination. "Thomas!" Matthew shouted, struggling to his feet. "What are you doing?" "Helping," the boy replied simply. Matthew quickly disarmed the wounded shooter, using the man's own belt to bind his hands. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Thomas's expression was unreadable. "Father showed me. Before Matthew could respond, Sheriff Pike and his deputies arrived, taking custody of the shooter. "Ellis Jenkins," Pike said, recognizing the man. "One of Prescott's miners." "He shot the marshal," Matthew said. "On Prescott's orders, I'd wager." Pike's face darkened. "That's a serious accusation, Crowder. Take a look at the courthouse. I think you'll find Prescott gone." Matthew was right. By the time they returned to the courthouse, Prescott had vanished. Marshall Hayes had been moved to Doc Wilson's office across the street, where the physician was treating his wound. Anna rushed to Matthew, inspecting the bloody gash on his temple. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he assured her, then turned to Thomas. "You shouldn't have followed me. That was dangerous." "I knew you'd need help," Thomas replied stubbornly. Matthew wanted to scold the boy, but found he couldn't, not when Thomas had likely saved his life. Instead, he placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Thank you, but don't ever do that again without my permission." Judge Miller had managed to restore some semblance of order to the courtroom. "In light of these extraordinary events," he announced, "this hearing is postponed until tomorrow. Mr. Crowder, I suggest you check on Marshall Hayes. He was asking for you." At the doctor's office, they found Hayes conscious but pale, his chest bandaged. The bullet had struck him in the shoulder, missing vital organs. "Crowder," Hayes rasped when Matthew entered. "Knew Prescott would try something. Too arrogant to let the law take its course." "You knew he'd make a move?" Hayes nodded weakly. "Been building a case against him for months. Witness intimidation, claim jumping, fraud. Your brother was helping me." Matthew felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. "So that's why James died." "Most likely." Hayes grimaced in pain. "James sent documents to my office in Denver. Proof of Prescott's schemes. I was coming to tell you when." He gestured to his wound. "What kind of documents?" "Ledgers, false claims, evidence Prescott was swindling miners, forging documents." Hayes coughed. "There's more. Your brother suspected someone was poisoning him. Wrote to me about it a week before he died." Anna gasped softly behind Matthew. "I knew it," she whispered. Hayes struggled to sit up. "Prescott will run. He'll know I have enough to hang him now." His eyes locked with Matthew's. "But he'll try to take something with him. Something valuable." "The children," Anna said, her voice tight with fear. "Or the gold," Matthew added. "We need to get back to the homestead. Now." They rode hard, Matthew and Thomas on horseback, Anna with June and Macy in the wagon. As they crested the rise overlooking the Crowder property, Matthew's worst fears were confirmed. Smoke rose from the barn. Two riders were visible in the distance, heading toward the eastern ridge, where the gold vein lay. "Prescott," Matthew growled. Anna pulled the wagon to a halt. "The barn's on fire." "You stay with the children," Matthew ordered. "Thomas and I will handle the barn." "And let Prescott escape with the gold?" "No." Anna's expression was fierce. "I'll handle the barn. You stop Prescott." Matthew hesitated, torn between responsibilities. "Go," Anna insisted. "I've put out fires before." Matthew nodded grimly. "Thomas, stay with Anna and your sisters." "But no arguments. They need protection too." Thomas reluctantly agreed, and Matthew spurred his horse toward the eastern ridge, following Prescott's trail. The ridge was steep, with narrow game trails winding through pine and aspen. Matthew pushed his horse as fast as he dared, guided by disturbed earth and broken branches left by Prescott's hasty passage. Near the top, he heard voices. He dismounted, tethered his horse, and proceeded on foot, revolver drawn. Prescott and a companion, Simmons, his attorney, stood before a small cave entrance, partially hidden by brush. Simmons held a lantern while Prescott examined the rock face. "This must be it," Prescott was saying, "the vein James described. Pure gold, just waiting to be taken." "We should hurry," Simmons urged nervously. "Once word spreads about Jenkins shooting the marshal, they'll come looking for us." "Let them look," Prescott replied dismissively. "By then we'll be in Denver with enough gold to start fresh. And if Crowder tries to follow," he patted the rifle slung across his back. Matthew stepped into the clearing, revolver aimed. "You're trespassing, Prescott." Both men whirled. Prescott's hand moved toward his rifle, but stopped when he saw Matthew's steady aim. "Crowder," he spat, "always interfering, just like your brother." "My brother who you murdered." Prescott's face twisted in a cruel smile. "Prove it. James was a fool. He found gold but wouldn't exploit it properly. Wouldn't sell to me. Said it belonged to his children's children." His voice dripped with contempt. "All that wealth wasted on sentiment." "Put your hands up, both of you," Matthew ordered. "You're going back to town to face charges." Simmons raised his hands immediately, but Prescott remained defiant. "You won't shoot an unarmed man, Crowder. You're too much like James, too honorable." "You're right about one thing," Matthew agreed. "I am like my brother, and that's why I won't let you take what belongs to his children." Prescott's eyes narrowed, calculating. Those children could have had everything. Proper schooling, fine clothes, opportunities. I would have given them that. After you stole their birthright? After you murdered their father? "Business, Crowder. Just business." Prescott took a small step to the side. "Tell me, how's Marshal Hayes? Will he survive to testify, I wonder?" "Don't move again," Matthew warned, his finger tightening on the trigger. Prescott smiled thinly. "You know, your new wife is quite beautiful. I offered to marry her after James died. She refused, of course. So proud, so loyal." His smile turned vicious. "I wonder if she told you about us. About before." Matthew's expression didn't change, but something cold settled in his stomach. "What are you talking about? Anna didn't tell you?" Prescott's laugh was ugly. "She worked for me in Denver. My personal secretary. We were close. Very close, until she stole documents from my office and fled. Imagine my surprise when I found her playing nursemaid to your dying brother." Matthew kept his aim steady, though his mind raced. "You're lying." "Am I? Ask her about the scar on her neck. Ask her who gave it to her." Before Matthew could respond, a sound came from behind him, a footstep on dry leaves. He began to turn, but too late. Pain exploded at the base of his skull, and darkness rushed in. Matthew woke to the taste of blood and earth. He lay face down on the ground, hands bound behind him. His head throbbed with each heartbeat. "He's awake," came Simmons's nervous voice. Matthew forced his eyes open. He was still at the cave entrance. Prescott knelt nearby, examining rock samples by lantern light. A third man, one of Prescott's miners, stood guard with Matthew's own revolver. "Welcome back, Crowder," Prescott said without looking up. "You've led me to quite a find. This vein is even richer than James described." Matthew tested his bonds. Rope, tightly knotted but not impossible to escape with time. Time he probably didn't have. "What are you planning to do with me, Prescott?" "Originally, leave you at the bottom of an abandoned mine shaft. Prescott held a rock to the light, admiring gold flecks embedded within. But I've reconsidered. You might be more valuable alive for now. As a hostage? As leverage. Your lovely wife has something I want. Documents James entrusted to her before he died. Proof of certain irregular business practices. The evidence Hayes mentioned. Precisely. Prescott finally looked at Matthew. Your brother was clever. He made copies, sent some to Hayes, kept others hidden. Anna knows where they are. And you think she'll trade them for me? For you, perhaps not. But for the children? Prescott's smile was cold. A mother will do anything for her children. The implication sent ice through Matthew's veins. If you touch those children, you'll what, Crowder? Prescott stood, brushing dirt from his expensive trousers. You'll be dead, like your brother, and I'll have the boat, the land, and eventually the lovely Anna. Boss, the guard interrupted, someone's coming. They all fell silent, listening. Hoofbeats approached, then stopped nearby. Check it, Prescott ordered. The guard moved toward the trail, Matthew's revolver ready. A moment later, a shot rang out. The guard staggered backward, clutching his arm, the revolver falling from his grasp. Thomas appeared at the edge of the clearing, James's old rifle in his hands, eyes burning with determination. Let him go, the boy demanded, working the lever to chamber another round. Prescott drew his own weapon with surprising speed, aiming at Thomas. Drop it, boy, or I'll put a bullet through your skull. Thomas, run, Matthew shouted, struggling against his bonds. Instead of running, Thomas stood his ground. You killed my father, he said, his voice steady despite his youth. You won't kill anyone else. Brave words, Prescott sneered, but foolish. A second figure emerged from the trees, Anna, shotgun raised. Lower your weapon, Daniel, she ordered her, or I'll cut you in half. Prescott froze, caught between two firearms. His eyes darted between Anna and Thomas, calculating odds. Anna, he said, his tone suddenly conciliatory, let's be reasonable. There's enough gold here for all of us. There's never enough for men like you, she replied coldly. Thomas, untie Matthew. The boy moved forward cautiously, rifle still trained on Prescott. You're making a mistake, Prescott warned. Even if you kill me, you'll never be safe. My associates in Denver will come looking. Your associates in Denver are being arrested as we speak, came a new voice. Marshal Hayes limped into the clearing, pale but upright, revolver steady in his hand. His shoulder was heavily bandaged, but his eyes were clear and determined. Federal marshals raided your Denver office this morning. Your operation is finished. Prescott. Prescott's face contorted with rage. With a roar, he swung his weapon toward Hayes. 3 shots rang out simultaneously. Hayes's revolver, Anna's shotgun, and Thomas's rifle. Prescott was thrown backward by the impact, his body crumpling to the ground. Blood pooled beneath him, soaking into the earth he had coveted so desperately. In the sudden silence, Thomas lowered the rifle, his young face pale but composed. Anna rushed to Matthew, cutting his bonds with a knife from her boot. Are you all right? She asked, helping him to his feet. I've been better, he admitted, rubbing his wrists to restore circulation. How did you find us? Thomas tracked you, she replied. The boy has a gift. Matthew looked at Thomas with new respect. You should have stayed with your sisters. They're safe with Mrs. Tillman in town, Anna explained. I couldn't leave you to face Prescott alone. Hayes approached, looking unsteady on his feet. Your family has courage, Crowder. James would be proud. Family. The word resonated strangely in Matthew's mind. 24 hours ago, he had been alone on his mountain. Now he stood surrounded by people willing to risk their lives for him. A wife he barely knew, a nephew who had saved him twice, and a wounded marshal who had trusted James enough to pursue justice. Simmons, forgotten in the confrontation, had collapsed against a tree, face buried in his hands. I never wanted this, he moaned. I'm just a lawyer. Prescott said it was all legal. Save it for the judge, Hayes advised wearily. You'll get your chance to testify against your former employer. As they prepared to return to town, Matthew pulled Thomas aside. What you did was brave, he said, and foolish, but mostly brave. The boy met his gaze steadily. Father always said a Crowder stands his ground. Your father was right. Matthew placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. He'd be proud of you today. I know I am. Something flickered in Thomas's eyes, a moment of vulnerability beneath the forced maturity. Do you think he saw, Father, I mean, from heaven? Matthew glanced at the sky, then back at the boy. I think James has been watching over all of us. The ride back to town was solemn. Prescott's body was slung over his own horse. Simmons rode with his hands bound, and the wounded guard limped alongside. Hayes, despite protests, insisted on riding under his own power, though his face grew paler with each passing mile. Anna rode beside Matthew, their silence comfortable rather than strained. Finally she spoke. Prescott told you about Denver, didn't he? Matthew nodded. He mentioned you worked for him. Anna's hands tightened on the reins. I was his secretary for 8 months. He was charming at first. Powerful. Generous. Her voice hardened. Then I discovered how he conducted business. The forged documents, the threats, the accidents that befell those who opposed him. What happened? She touched her neck, where a thin scar ran just below her jaw. I threatened to expose him. He threatened to kill me. When I tried to leave with evidence, She swallowed. He made it clear no one leaves Daniel Prescott. But you escaped. Barely. I fled to Colorado Springs, then Central City, working as a nurse. When James came for treatment, I recognized the Crowder name from Prescott's documents. Your brother had refused to sell his land despite mounting pressure. So you warned him? Anna nodded, and he offered protection in return. Our marriage began as an arrangement. My nursing skills and knowledge of Prescott's operations in exchange for his name and the safety it provided. Her eyes met Matthew's, but it became more. James was a good man, kind, honorable. Like his children, Matthew observed. Yes. A small smile touched her lips. Especially Thomas. He has James's strength and your stubbornness. My stubbornness? James told me stories about his little brother, how you'd never back down, never surrender, even when outnumbered. She glanced at him. He admired that about you, even when it frustrated him. The thought that James had spoken of him with admiration rather than disappointment was strangely comforting. Perhaps his brother had understood more than Matthew gave him credit for. As they approached Pikes Creek, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the valley. Smoke still rose from the Crowder barn, though the fire had been contained before destroying the structure completely. Word of Prescott's death and the dramatic events at the Ridge had spread through town. People lined the street, watching in solemn silence as the procession passed. Some nodded respectfully to Matthew. Others looked away, perhaps ashamed of their former allegiance to Prescott. Sheriff Pike met them at the jail, his expression grave. Marshal Hayes, Crowder, I'll take the prisoners from here. Hayes dismounted carefully, handing over Simmons. Sheriff, I believe you have some explaining to do regarding your relationship with Prescott. Pike's face reddened. I never knew he'd go this far. Murder, fraud, I thought he was just a hard businessman. A convenient blindness, Hayes observed coldly. We'll discuss it further when I'm not bleeding through my bandages. At the doctor's office, they found June and Macy waiting with Mrs. Tillman. The girls rushed to Anna, wrapping their arms around her skirts. Are the bad men gone? Macy asked, her small face serious. Anna knelt, embracing both girls. Yes, sweetheart. The bad men are gone. June looked up at Matthew, her solemn eyes assessing. Forever? Matthew nodded. Forever. The little girl considered this, then held out her hand to Matthew. He took it, surprised by the small, warm fingers curling trustingly around his own. Home now? She asked quietly. Matthew glanced at Anna, who watched the interaction with gentle eyes. Yes, he said, home now. The following days passed in a blur of testimony, legal proceedings, and rebuilding. Simmons, in exchange for leniency, provided detailed evidence of Prescott's crimes, including the systematic poisoning of James Crowder with small doses of arsenic in his medicine. Judge Miller officially recognized Matthew and Anna's guardianship of the children, and their marriage was recorded in the county registry without further challenge. The gold vein, while not as extensive as Prescott had believed, was significant enough to ensure the family's financial security. Matthew hired former miners who had been cheated by Prescott to work the claim properly, paying fair wages and profit sharing. The burned section of the barn was rebuilt with the help of neighbors, many eager to make amends for their silence during Prescott's reign of intimidation. Through it all, Matthew found himself adjusting to family life with surprising ease. The mountain still called to him sometimes, its silence, its simplicity, but the pull was weaker now, counterbalanced by new connections. One evening, a week after Prescott's death, Matthew sat on the porch cleaning his rifle as sunset painted the valley gold. The door opened, and Anna joined him, offering a cup of coffee. "The children are asleep," she said, settling beside him. Even Thomas, though he fought it as usual. Matthew accepted the coffee gratefully. He's afraid to miss something, afraid if he sleeps, the world might change again. "He trusts you now," Anna observed. "They all do. I'm not sure I deserve it." Trust isn't about deserving. It's about proving yourself reliable, day after day. She sipped her own coffee. "Like you have." They sat in comfortable silence, watching darkness claim the valley. Stars appeared, brilliant against the mountain sky. "I should check the perimeter before turning in," Matthew said eventually. Anna touched his arm lightly. "The war's over, Matthew. Prescott is gone, the children are safe." "Old habits. I understand. James was the same way when I first met him. Always watching, always alert." Her voice softened. "It takes time to remember peace is possible." Matthew nodded, realizing the truth in her words. Since coming down the mountain, he had been operating in a state of constant vigilance, necessary during the conflict with Prescott, but perhaps not anymore. "Matthew," Anna said carefully, "there's something we should discuss about our arrangement." He tensed slightly. "What about it?" "It's been a week. The danger has passed. The legal matters are settled." She met his gaze directly. "If you wish to return to your mountain, I would understand. We could maintain the marriage on paper for the children's sake. While I what? Abandon them again?" The words came out harsher than he intended. "Not abandon, just live as you choose." Her expression was carefully neutral. "You never chose this life, Matthew. It was thrust upon you by circumstance." Matthew considered her words, turning them over in his mind like the gold samples from the ridge. Had he chosen this life, or merely reacted to events beyond his control? He thought of Thomas's determined face as he stood against Prescott, of June's small hand in his, of Macy's delight when he carved her a wooden horse, of Anna's quiet strength through it all. "What if I have chosen it?" he asked quietly. "What if this is where I want to be?" Something flickered in Anna's eyes, hope, perhaps, or relief. "Then we continue as we are, partners in raising the children." "And us?" The question surprised even him. A faint blush colored her cheeks. "That would be a different kind of partnership, one that would take time to build." "Time we have now," Matthew observed. Anna smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and softened the worry lines that had marked her face since he'd met her. "Yes, time we have." From inside came a small cry, Macy having one of her nightmares. Anna rose immediately, but Matthew touched her arm. "I'll go," he said. "Get some rest." Inside, he found Macy sitting up in bed, tears on her cheeks. "The bad man was chasing me," she whispered. Matthew sat beside her, awkwardly patting her small shoulder. "There are no bad men anymore. You're safe." She looked up at him with James's eyes. "Promise?" "I promise." He hesitated, then added, "Would you like me to stay until you fall asleep?" She nodded, lying back down. "Can you tell a story, like Papa used to?" Matthew had no experience with bedtime stories, but he found himself speaking anyway. Once, there was a soldier who got lost in the mountains. He told her about a man who forgot how to live among people, who built walls around his heart, who thought he would die alone, and how that man found his way back to a family he never knew he needed. By the time he finished, Macy was asleep, her small hand still clutching his finger. In the doorway, Anna watched, unseen. And on his mountain, Armayan, now visible through the bedroom window, the evening stars shone like a beacon calling him home, not to the solitude he had known, but to the family he had found. Morning broke over Pikes Creek with unusual clarity, the air washed clean by overnight rain. Matthew stood on the porch of the Crowder homestead, coffee in hand, watching the eastern ridge turn gold in the early light, the same ridge where Prescott had died a week earlier, a week that had transformed everything. The barn repairs were nearly complete, the last charred beams replaced with fresh-cut pine. The gold claim had been properly registered, with Thomas as primary heir and Matthew as trustee. Marshal Hayes had departed for Denver 2 days prior, promising to return with additional federal agents to complete the investigation into Prescott's affairs. "You're up early," came Anna's voice behind him. Matthew turned. She stood in the doorway, hair loose around her shoulders, shawl drawn against the morning chill. In the soft dawn light, he was struck by how young she looked, how the worry lines had faded from around her eyes. "Old habits," he replied, offering her his coffee. She accepted, their fingers brushing briefly. "The children are still asleep, even Thomas." "Good, he needs it." They stood in comfortable silence, passing the coffee cup between them as the sun climbed higher. Birds began their morning songs, and somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed. "I've been thinking," Matthew said finally, "about the mine." "What about it?" "James never wanted it worked extensively, just enough to provide for the family." Anna nodded. "He said large-scale mining would destroy the land, leave nothing for future generations." He was right. Matthew gestured toward the ridge. "That gold has caused enough blood and pain. I'm thinking we should seal most of the vein, keep only a small section active. The children's inheritance will be the land itself, clean water, healthy forest, things worth more than gold." Matthew turned to face her fully. "What do you think?" Anna's eyes widened slightly, surprised by the question. "You're asking my opinion? You're their mother in every way that matters, and my wife, on paper at least." A faint blush colored her cheeks at the reminder of their unusual arrangement. "I think James would approve, and I believe the children will be richer for it in ways that matter." The door creaked open and Thomas appeared, hair tousled from sleep but eyes alert. "Are you talking about the mine?" Matthew and Anna exchanged glances. The boy missed nothing. "Yes," Matthew admitted. "I'm considering sealing most of it." Thomas frowned, considering. "Because of what happened to Father?" "Partly, and because some treasures are best left where they are." The boy was silent for a long moment, then nodded decisively. "Father would agree." He hesitated, then added, "Does this mean we're staying? For good?" The question hung in the air. Anna glanced at Matthew, her expression carefully neutral, but he caught the flicker of concern in her eyes. "Yes," Matthew said firmly, "we're staying." Relief washed over Thomas's face, quickly masked by attempted nonchalance. "Good, because I still have a lot to learn about tracking, and June needs help with the garden, and Macy needs a father," Matthew finished quietly. "I know." Thomas looked away, suddenly finding the weathered porch boards fascinating. "She asked me yesterday if she could call you Pa now." Something tightened in Matthew's chest. "What did you tell her?" "I said she should ask you herself." Thomas met Matthew's gaze, his young face serious beyond his years. "Would that be all right, if we called you Pa?" Matthew felt Anna's eyes on him, waiting. This was more than permission for a name. It was acceptance of a role, a commitment he had been avoiding for 7 years. "I would be honored," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion, "though I'm still learning how to be worthy of it." Thomas's face broke into a rare smile. "Father said that's what makes a good parent, always trying to be better." Before Matthew could respond, hoofbeats sounded on the approach to the house. His hand instinctively moved to his hip, where his revolver hung even now. Sheriff Pike appeared on horseback, his expression grave. He reined in at the porch steps, removing his hat. "Crowder, Mrs. Crowder, Thomas." He nodded to each in turn. "I'm afraid I bring troubling news." Matthew tensed. "What is it?" "Simmons is dead, found in his cell this morning, hung himself with his belt." Anna gasped softly. "How is that possible? Wasn't he being watched?" Pike's face colored with shame. Deputy Miller fell asleep. By the time he checked, Simmons was gone. "Convenient," Matthew observed coldly. "There's more," Pike continued. "Before he died, Simmons wrote a confession. Claimed Prescott had partners in Denver who knew about James's murder. Said they'd be coming to tie up loose ends." "What partners?" Matthew demanded. "He didn't name names, just warned they were powerful men who wouldn't let Prescott's death go unanswered." Pike shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "I've doubled patrols in town, but you can't protect us out here," Anna finished. Pike nodded grimly. I'd suggest coming into town until Marshal Hayes returns with federal support. Matthew exchanged glances with Anna. Her face was composed, but he saw the fear in her eyes. Not for herself, but for the children. We'll consider it, Matthew said. Thank you for the warning. After Pike departed, Anna went inside to prepare breakfast, leaving Matthew and Thomas on the porch. More trouble, Thomas observed quietly. Looks that way. The boy fingered the knife at his belt, a habit he'd developed since the confrontation with Prescott. They'll come for the gold, and for Anna. Matthew gave him a sharp look. What makes you say that? I heard Prescott talking to Simmons once, when they thought I was asleep, about Anna knowing too much about the Denver operation, about her being a liability. Why didn't you mention this before? Thomas shrugged. Didn't seem important after Prescott died? His young face hardened. But if more men are coming, they'll want what he wanted. Matthew placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Thomas, I want you to take your sisters into town today. Stay with Mrs. Tillman. I won't leave you and Anna to face them alone, Thomas protested. You won't be leaving us. You'll be protecting your sisters. Matthew squeezed the thin shoulder beneath his hand. That's what a man does. Protects those who can't protect themselves. Thomas considered this, then nodded reluctantly. But you'll send word if anything happens? I promise. Inside, they found Anna serving breakfast to the girls. June sat quietly, methodically cutting her flapjacks into precise squares, while Macy chattered about a dream involving flying horses. Anna, Matthew said from the doorway, we need to discuss Pike's warning. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. After breakfast. The meal passed with forced normalcy, though Matthew noticed Anna's gaze frequently moving to the windows, scanning the tree line. When the children had finished eating, she sent them upstairs to dress. You're sending them to town, she said when they were alone. It wasn't a question. With Thomas, they'll stay with Mrs. Tillman. And us? We prepare. Matthew moved to the sideboard, opening a drawer to reveal a box of ammunition. I won't be driven from this land, Anna, not by Prescott, not by his Denver partners. She studied him, her blue eyes searching his face. This isn't just about the land anymore, is it? It's about James, about what they did to him. Matthew's jaw tightened. They poisoned my brother, slowly, made him suffer, and I wasn't here to stop it. You couldn't have known. I should have been here. The guilt he'd carried for 7 years surfaced like a physical pain. James wrote to me, told me things were difficult, that Prescott was pressuring him. I ignored it, stayed on my mountain. Anna moved closer, placing a hand on his arm. Matthew, you can't change the past, but you're here now, for his children, for me. He covered her hand with his own, rough fingers against smooth skin. I won't fail him again. Or you. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a current of understanding, of shared purpose, and perhaps something more. The moment was broken by footsteps on the stairs as the children returned, dressed for town. By mid-morning, the wagon was prepared. Matthew loaded the children's belongings while Anna gave last-minute instructions to Thomas. Remember, keep June and Macy inside after dark. Help Mrs. Tillman with chores. And Thomas, she knelt to his level, straightening his collar. Watch over your sisters. I will, he promised solemnly. Macy threw her arms around Matthew's waist. Why can't you come too, Pa? The name, spoken for the first time, caught him off guard. He knelt, meeting her tearful gaze. Someone has to watch the farm, little one. But we'll come for you soon. She considered this, then reached into her pocket, producing a small, carved wooden horse, the one Matthew had made for her. Take horse, he'll protect you. Matthew accepted the toy gravely. I'll keep him safe until you return. June approached next, her silence more profound than usual. She pressed a folded paper into his hand. Opening it, he found a drawing of the family, stick figures labeled with their names, standing before the house, holding hands. It's beautiful, June, he said softly. Thank you. She nodded once, then took Macy's hand, leading her to the wagon. Thomas was the last to say goodbye. He stood before Matthew, struggling to maintain his composure. 3 days, Matthew told him. If you haven't heard from us by then, ride to Denver. Find Marshal Hayes. The boy nodded, then impulsively threw his arms around Matthew in a fierce hug. Don't die, he whispered fiercely. Matthew held him tight for a moment. I don't plan to. As the wagon disappeared down the road, Anna and Matthew stood side by side, watching until it vanished from sight. 3 days, Anna murmured. Do you really think they'll come so soon? Men like Prescott's partners don't waste time, Matthew replied grimly. We need to prepare. They spent the day fortifying the house, boarding windows, stockpiling ammunition, preparing food and water. Matthew showed Anna how to reload the shotgun quickly, though she proved more adept than expected. James taught me, she explained, after the first time Prescott threatened us. As evening approached, they moved furniture to create defensive positions within the house. The front door was barricaded, leaving only the kitchen entrance accessible. We should eat, Anna said as darkness fell. Keep up our strength. They shared a simple meal of beans and cornbread by lamplight, sitting close at the kitchen table. The house felt eerily empty without the children's voices. Tell me about Denver, Matthew said suddenly. About your life before. Anna looked surprised by the question. Why? If we're defending this house together, I should know who I'm fighting alongside. She smiled faintly at his phrasing. Not much to tell. I grew up in St. Louis, daughter of a school teacher. Learned typing and stenography. Came west after my parents died, looking for opportunity. And found Prescott. Yes, her expression darkened. He seemed charming at first, successful, attentive. I was flattered by his interest, a powerful man noticing a simple secretary. What changed? I started noticing discrepancies in the accounts, properties transferring ownership after accidents, minors signing away claims while delirious with fever. She touched the scar on her neck unconsciously. When I confronted him, I saw the real Daniel Prescott. Yet you escaped. Anna nodded. Barely. I took what evidence I could and fled. Changed my name from Annabelle Ward to simply Anna. Worked as a nurse in mining Samza, moving when I became too nervous. Her eyes met his. Then I met James. He was different, honest, kind. When I told him about Prescott, he offered protection. And you married him. At first for safety, yes. But I grew to care for him deeply, and for the children. Her gaze didn't waver. I never told him about Prescott's threats against me. I was afraid he'd confront him directly. As he eventually did anyway. Yes, over the gold, not me. She sighed. James was stubborn, like you. Matthew's mouth twitched. Crowder family trait. A comfortable silence fell between them. Outside, the wind picked up, branches scratching against the roof like ghostly fingers. We should rest, Matthew said finally. Take watches through the night. I'll take first watch, Anna offered. You've barely slept all week. He wanted to protest but recognized the wisdom in her words. Wake me in 4 hours. 6, you need the sleep. Their eyes met in silent contest of wills. Finally, Matthew nodded. 6 hours, but at the first sign of trouble, I'll wake you, she promised. Now go. He retired to James's old room, the master bedroom he had avoided until now. The space still held echoes of his brother. A pipe on the dresser, a worn Bible on the nightstand, a pair of boots in the corner. Matthew sat heavily on the bed, exhaustion suddenly washing over him. He had been running on determination and caffeine for days, pushing aside grief and guilt to focus on the immediate threats. Now, in the quiet of his brother's room, it all caught up with him. I'm sorry, James, he whispered to the empty air. I should have been here. He imagined his brother's response, not condemnation, but the wry humor James had always displayed. Better late than never, little brother. Despite his intention to remain alert, Matthew fell into deep sleep almost immediately. He dreamed of Gettysburg, smoke and screams, the thunder of artillery, men falling around him. But this time, when he reached James's side in the field hospital, his brother gripped his hand and spoke different words. Go home, Matthew. They need you now. He woke with a start, disoriented in the darkness. Something had disturbed his sleep. A sound? A presence? Anna stood in the doorway, shotgun in hand. Riders, she said quietly. At least 3, approaching slowly from the east. Matthew was instantly alert, reaching for his revolver on the nightstand. How far? Half a mile, maybe less. They've doused their lanterns. He rose, checking his weapon. Position? Coming along the creek bed, using the trees for cover. Matthew nodded grimly. Smart. They're trying to flank us from the rear. He moved to the window, peering into the darkness. The quarter moon provided just enough light to make out shadows moving among the trees. 3, maybe 4 men. What's the plan? Anna asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. We let them come closer, make them think we're unaware. Matthew's mind raced, assessing options. The barn. We can use it. How? If they think we're sleeping in the house, they'll approach cautiously, expose themselves crossing the open ground between the trees and the house. He checked his ammunition. I'll position in the barn loft. When they're in the open, I'll have clear shots. Anna frowned. And me? Stay in the house. If any get past me, you'll be the second line. She shook her head firmly. No, we stay together. Better positioning from the house anyway. More sight lines. Matthew wanted to argue but saw the determination in her eyes. And she was right. The house offered better defensive positions. All right, he conceded, but we make it look like we're unprepared. One lamp in the kitchen, like we've gone to bed. They moved quickly, extinguishing most lights and positioning themselves at different windows. Matthew at the front parlor, Anna covering the side approach from the dining room. The minutes stretched endlessly as they waited, the only sounds their measured breathing and the distant hooting of an owl. Matthew, Anna whispered from her position, if something happens to me. Nothing will happen to you, he interrupted firmly. If it does, she continued, promise me you'll stay with the children. Be their father. The weight of her request settled on him. Not just a temporary guardianship, but a lifetime commitment. I promise, he said, but you'll be there too. A twig snapped outside, closer than expected. Matthew tensed, finger resting lightly on the trigger. Through the gap in the curtains, he could make out dark figures moving at the edge of the yard. 4 men, heavily armed, spreading out to surround the house. One raised his hand, signaling to the others. Even in the dim light, Matthew recognized him. A well-dressed man with a distinctive gold watch chain. Not Prescott, but cut from the same cloth. One of the Denver partners. The men began their approach, crouching low, using the scattered farm equipment as cover. They moved with practiced efficiency, not ordinary thugs, but trained gunmen. Matthew took careful aim at the leader. At this range, even in poor light, he couldn't miss. His finger tightened on the trigger. The blast of Anna's shotgun shattered the night. One of the men screamed, falling backward. The others scattered, diving for cover. Anna, Matthew shouted, firing at the leader, who rolled behind a water trough. Left side, she called back. One was coming through the kitchen door. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, bullets splintering wood and shattering windows. Matthew moved from his position, staying low, making his way to Anna. He found her reloading the shotgun, glass from the broken window scattered around her. A streak of blood marked her cheek where a splinter had cut her. Are you hit? He demanded. No, you? I'm fine. He peered cautiously around the window frame. I count 3 still active, 1 down by the barn. The leader, he shouted something about burning us out. Matthew's blood ran cold. The barn, they'll use it for kindling. As if confirming his fears, a flicker of orange light appeared near the barn door. One of the men had lit a torch. We need to stop them before they get that fire going, Matthew said grimly. I'm going out the back. Anna grabbed his arm. That's suicide. It's our only chance. If they burn the barn, the house will follow. He met her gaze steadily. Cover me from here. Aim for the torch first. Before she could protest further, Matthew slipped out the kitchen door, staying in the shadows of the house. The night air was cool against his face as he moved silently along the wall, revolver ready. The man with the torch had reached the barn, preparing to set the dry wood ablaze. 20 yards away, the leader crouched behind the water trough, shouting orders. Burn it! Smoke them out! Matthew took careful aim and fired. The torchbearer screamed, dropping the flaming brand as Matthew's bullet found his shoulder. The torch fell into a puddle, hissing into darkness. Answering fire came immediately, bullets thudding into the wall beside Matthew. He ducked, rolling to new cover behind a stack of firewood. Anna's shotgun roared from the house, peppering the area around the water trough. The leader cursed, scrambling backward. Matthew seized the opportunity, moving from cover to cover, working his way toward the barn. If he could reach the loft, he'd have the high ground. A shadow detached itself from the darkness to his right. The third gunman, flanking him. Matthew spun, firing twice. The man grunted, staggered, but returned fire. Pain seared across Matthew's side as a bullet grazed his ribs. He pressed his hand to the wound, feeling warm blood seep between his fingers. Not serious, but painful enough to slow him down. The barn door loomed before him. He made a final dash, bullets kicking up dirt at his heels, and threw himself inside. The interior was pitch black, the familiar smells of hay and livestock surrounding him. He moved by memory, finding the ladder to the loft. Each rung sent pain shooting through his side, but he forced himself upward. From the loft window, he had a clear view of the yard. The leader had abandoned the water trough, moving toward the house with renewed determination. The torchbearer lay motionless where he had fallen. The third man was nowhere to be seen. Matthew took aim at the leader, squeezing the trigger slowly, controlling his breathing despite the pain. Click, his revolver was empty. Matthew cursed silently, fumbling for spare ammunition in his pocket. His fingers, slick with blood, struggled with the cartridges. Below, the barn door creaked open. "Crowder," came a voice from the darkness. "I know you're in here." The third gunman had followed him into the barn. Matthew froze, caught in the vulnerable position of reloading. "You've caused a lot of trouble," the voice continued, moving closer to the ladder. "Prescott was right about you. Said you'd be a problem if you ever came down from that mountain." Matthew worked silently, sliding cartridges into the chamber. "Prescott talked too much about you and your brother, how James wouldn't sell the land, how you were the dangerous one." A bitter laugh. "Guess he was right about that." The ladder creaked as the gunman began to climb. Matthew finished reloading, but waited, timing his move. "Nothing personal, Crowder. Just business." As the man's head cleared the loft floor, Matthew swung the revolver like a club, connecting with a satisfying crack. The gunman fell backward, tumbling to the barn floor with a heavy thud. Matthew peered over the edge. The man lay still, his neck at an unnatural angle. Dead. Outside, gunfire continued, Anna exchanging shots with the leader. Matthew moved to the loft window, sighting down his freshly loaded revolver. The leader had reached the porch, pressing himself against the wall beside the front door. Anna's shotgun blast splintered wood inches from his head. Matthew took careful aim and fired. The leader staggered, clutching his leg, but remained upright. He turned, firing wildly toward the barn. A bullet whizzed past Matthew's ear. He ducked instinctively, then rose to fire again. His shot caught the leader in the shoulder, spinning him around. The man fell to his knees, then toppled forward onto the porch steps. Silence descended, broken only by the moaning of the wounded leader. "Anna?" Matthew called. "I'm here," came her reply from the house. "Are you hurt?" "Just a graze. Stay inside until I check it's clear." Matthew descended from the loft, grimacing at the pain in his side. Outside, he approached the fallen leader cautiously, revolver trained on the man's back. The leader rolled over, revealing a face twisted with pain. Blood soaked his expensive suit where Matthew's bullets had found their mark. "You've lost, Crowder," the man gasped. "You don't even know what you're fighting against." Matthew kicked the man's revolver away. "I know enough. You and Prescott murdered my brother for his land." The man laughed weakly. "For his land? You think this was about a few acres in Colorado?" He coughed, blood speckling his lips. "Prescott was just a local agent. We have operations across 3 territories: mining claims, railroads, banks." "Who's we?" "Wouldn't you like to know?" Despite his wounds, the man's eyes gleamed with malice. "Kill me, and 2 more will come. Then 4. Then 8. You can't stop what's coming, Crowder." Matthew knelt beside the dying man. "What's your name?" Surprise flickered across the man's face. "What?" "Your name." "I want to know who I've killed." "Harrison. William Harrison." The man coughed again, more violently. "Why does it matter?" "Because unlike you, I don't kill nameless men." Matthew's voice was cold. "I want to remember who came after my family." Harrison's eyes widened slightly, something like respect flickering in their depths. "Family," he echoed. "That's your weakness, Crowder. Men like us don't have families, just interests." "Then I pity you." The light was fading from Harrison's eyes. "Your brother said the same thing before the end." Matthew's hand shot out, gripping the man's bloodied lapel. "You were there when James died?" "I watched." Harrison's voice was fading. Prescott wanted witnesses, said it was a message to others who might resist. Rage flooded Matthew, hot and fierce. He wanted to put a bullet through Harrison's skull to obliterate the smug face that had watched his brother die. Instead, he released his grip, letting the man fall back against the steps. "Matthew?" Anna called from the doorway, shotgun still ready. "It's over," he replied, standing slowly. "They're all down." She came to his side, her face pale in the moonlight. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing." He turned to survey the carnage in their yard. 3 bodies, blood soaking into the soil his brother had loved. "We need to alert Sheriff Pike. First, let me tend that wound." Her tone brooked no argument. "Then we'll decide what to do." Inside, she cleaned and bandaged his side with practiced efficiency. Her hands were gentle but firm, the touch of a woman who had nursed many wounded men. Harrison said there would be more, Matthew told her as she worked, that killing him would only bring others. "Do you believe him?" Matthew considered. "Yes, men like Prescott and Harrison don't work alone. They're part of something bigger." "Then what do we do?" Anna tied off the bandage, her eyes meeting his. "Keep fighting? Keep killing? For how long?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Matthew had no answer. A noise outside made them both tense. Hoofbeats on the road, approaching fast. "More of them," Anna whispered, reaching for the shotgun. Matthew moved to the window, peering into the darkness. A lone rider approached at a gallop, silhouetted against the night sky. As the rider drew nearer, recognition dawned. "It's Thomas," Matthew said in disbelief. The boy reined in his horse with a shower of dirt, leaping from the saddle before the animal had fully stopped. "Thomas," Anna called, rushing onto the porch. "What are you doing here? Where are your sisters?" "Safe with Mrs. Tillman," Thomas replied breathlessly. His eyes widened at the sight of Harrison's body on the steps. "You were attacked." "How did you know?" Matthew demanded. "Marshal Hayes returned this afternoon. Said Prescott's partners would be coming." Thomas swallowed hard. "I had to warn you." "So you rode alone? At night?" Anna's voice was tight with fear and anger. "Thomas, you could have been killed." "I couldn't let you face them alone," the boy insisted. "You're my family." The simple declaration struck Matthew to the core. Family. The word he had run from for 7 years. The responsibility he had abandoned on his mountain. And yet here was this boy, brave, loyal, fierce in his protection of those he loved. James's son in every way that mattered. "You did well, Thomas," Matthew said quietly. "But don't ever take a risk like that again without telling us." Relief washed over the boy's face. "Marshal Hayes is coming with deputies. They should be here by morning." Matthew nodded, a plan forming in his mind. "Good, because we have work to do before they arrive." "What kind of work?" Anna asked. Matthew looked toward the eastern ridge, where the gold vein lay, the treasure that had cost so much blood. "We're going to seal the mine," he said firmly, "all of it, before anyone else dies for what's beneath that rock." Dawn broke over the Crowder homestead, painting the aftermath of violence in harsh clarity. 3 bodies lay where they had fallen, Harrison on the porch steps, one man by the barn, another in the yard where Anna's shotgun had found him. Matthew, Anna, and Thomas worked methodically, wrapping the bodies in canvas for transport to town. None spoke much. The gravity of the night's events weighed heavily on them all. Thomas had insisted on helping despite Anna's protests. The boy worked with grim determination, his young face set in lines too old for his years. When they finished, he washed blood from his hands in the water trough, scrubbing with almost desperate intensity. Matthew approached, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You all right?" Thomas nodded stiffly. "Just thinking about Father, about how he died." "Harrison told me he was there," Matthew said quietly. "That they watched." Thomas's hands stilled in the water. "I was there too, not when it happened, but after I found him." His voice remained steady, but his hands trembled slightly. "He told me to be brave, to protect the girls," his last words. Matthew's grip tightened on the boy's shoulder. No child should bear such memories, such burdens. Yet Thomas had carried this alone for months. "You've done well, Thomas. Your father would be proud." The boy looked up, something vulnerable breaking through his carefully maintained composure. "Do you think it's over now?" With them dead? Matthew wished he could offer comforting lies, but Thomas deserved the truth. No, Harrison said there would be others. Their organization is bigger than Prescott, bigger than these men. Then what do we do? It was Anna who answered, joining them at the trough. We change the game. Take away what they want. By mid-morning, Marshal Hayes arrived with 4 deputies and a wagon. The lawman looked grim as he surveyed the scene, but nodded in approval at Matthew's account. You were right to defend yourselves, he confirmed. These men were known associates of Prescott's Denver operation. Professional gunmen, all of them. Harrison said more would come, Matthew informed him. Hayes nodded grimly. Likely true. The syndicate Prescott worked for has tentacles throughout the territories. Mining, railroads, banking, anywhere money flows, they have interests. And they want our land, the gold. They want control, Hayes corrected. Your brother's refusal to sell represented more than lost profit. It was defiance, an example others might follow. While the deputies loaded the bodies, Hayes examined the documents Matthew had recovered from Harrison's coat. Letters, claim receipts, a small notebook with encoded entries. This will help, the marshal said, pocketing the evidence. But it won't stop them. Men like these are replaceable. We need to reach higher. The Denver partners, Anna suggested. Yes, but they're careful, protected by politics and money. Hayes's expression was troubled. I can post deputies here for a time, but I can't offer permanent protection. Matthew exchanged glances with Anna. We have a plan. They led Hayes to the eastern ridge, where the small cave entrance revealed the gold vein. Thomas followed close behind, insisting on being included in all discussions. James never wanted large-scale mining here, Matthew explained, just enough to provide for his family. He said the land was worth more than the gold beneath it, Anna added, that it was the children's true inheritance. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. A wise man, your brother. We're going to seal it, Matthew declared, all of it except a small section for the family's needs. Without the gold, there's nothing for the syndicate to fight for. You're sure, Hayes asked. That vein could be worth a fortune. A fortune soaked in blood, Matthew replied. James knew what mattered. So do we. Hayes studied him thoughtfully. You've changed, Crowder. When I first heard about the mountain hermit coming down to claim his brother's children, I had my doubts. So did I, Matthew admitted. Yet here you stand, ready to bury a fortune to protect your family. Hayes smiled slightly. James would approve. Thomas stepped forward. I'll help. It's my inheritance too. Matthew placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Yes, it is, and your decision matters. Father would want this, Thomas said firmly. The land, not the gold. By noon, they had begun preparations to seal the mine. Hayes sent 2 deputies to fetch explosives from town, while Matthew, Thomas, and the remaining lawmen cleared the cave entrance and marked the small section they would leave accessible. Anna returned to the homestead to prepare a meal for the workers, taking the opportunity to send word to Mrs. Tillman that all was well and the girls should remain in town another day. As Matthew worked alongside Thomas, showing him how to position support beams for the section they would preserve, he found himself impressed by the boy's aptitude and determination. You're good at this, he observed. Quick to learn. Thomas shrugged, but Matthew caught the flicker of pride in his eyes. Father started teaching me before he got sick. Said a man should know how to work the land. He was right. Matthew adjusted a beam. Though there are other things worth knowing too. Things I could teach you. Like what? Tracking, hunting, reading the mountains. Matthew glanced at the boy. If you're interested. Thomas's face brightened. Really? You'd teach me what you learned up there? He gestured toward the higher peaks where Matthew had spent his 7 years of solitude. Yes, though we'd start closer to home. The boy seemed to consider this seriously. Would we go up to your cabin sometime? See where you lived? The question surprised Matthew. His mountain refuge had been so private, so personal. Yet the thought of sharing it with Thomas felt right somehow. Yes, he decided. When things settle, we'll make an expedition of it. Thomas's smile, rare and unguarded, was reward enough. By late afternoon, the explosives had arrived, and Hayes supervised their placement. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Collapse the main tunnel leading to the vein, leaving only a small side passage accessible through a concealed entrance. As dusk approached, they prepared for the detonation. Everyone withdrew to a safe distance while Hayes set the fuses. "Fire in the hole!" he shouted, running to join them behind a rocky outcropping. The explosion was deafening, a deep rumble followed by the sound of collapsing rock. Dust billowed from the cave entrance, hanging in the air like smoke. When it cleared, they approached cautiously. Where the main entrance had been, only rubble remained. The smaller access point, cleverly disguised by natural rock formations, would be known only to the family. "It's done," Matthew said quietly. Thomas stood beside him, face solemn. "Father would understand." "Yes," Matthew agreed, he would. As they descended the ridge toward home, Hayes rode alongside Matthew. "This won't end their interest completely," the marshal warned. "The syndicate is persistent." "But without the gold, we're just another homestead," Matthew reasoned. "Not worth the risk of federal attention." "Perhaps." Hayes didn't sound entirely convinced. "I'll keep deputies in town for a few weeks, just in case. And I'll be back when we move against the Denver partners." "You have enough evidence now?" Hayes patted his pocket where Harrison's documents rested. "Getting closer. These will help, but we need more. Someone on the inside willing to talk." "If there's anything we can do," Matthew offered, "just keep your family safe, Crowder. That's contribution enough." Family. The word no longer felt foreign to Matthew. Somewhere in the chaos of the past weeks, it had become his identity. Not a burden, but a purpose. The next morning, Matthew and Anna rode into town to collect the girls. Thomas insisted on accompanying them, unwilling to be separated again so soon. Pikes Creek seemed transformed. Or perhaps it was Matthew's perception that had changed. Where once he had seen only painful memories and curious stares, he now recognized friendly faces, potential allies, a community. At Mrs. Tillman's house, June and Macy erupted from the door before they had fully dismounted, running toward them with squeals of delight. "Pa! Anna!" Macy launched herself into Matthew's arms. "You were gone forever." "Only 2 days, little one," he corrected, lifting her easily. June attached herself to Anna, arms wrapped tightly around her waist. To everyone's surprise, the girl spoke, her voice clear though quiet. "Home now?" Anna knelt, brushing hair from June's forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going home now." Mrs. Tillman appeared in the doorway, beaming at the reunion. "They were perfect angels," she reported, though Miss June had trouble sleeping, kept drawing pictures of the house. June reached into her pocket, extracting a folded paper. She offered it to Matthew silently. He opened it to find a remarkably detailed drawing of the Crowder homestead. In front stood 5 figures: Matthew, Anna, Thomas, June, and Macy. Above the house, something that looked like an angel hovered. "Is that?" Matthew began. "Father?" Thomas supplied, looking over his shoulder. "June says he watches over us." Matthew swallowed against a sudden tightness in his throat. "It's beautiful, June. Thank you." The girl nodded solemnly, then slipped her hand into his with natural ease. As they prepared to leave, Marshal Hayes approached on horseback. "Crowder, Mrs. Crowder, a moment of your time." Matthew passed Macy to Anna and stepped aside with the marshal. "What is it?" "Telegram from Denver," Hayes said quietly. "The syndicate is pulling back operations in Colorado territory. Seems our actions have rattled them." "Good news then?" "For now, they'll regroup eventually, but we've bought time." Hayes handed Matthew a folded document. "This just arrived from the territorial office. Official recognition of your guardianship and adoption of the Crowder children." Matthew opened the paper, scanning the legal text with surprise. "Adoption? We didn't file for—" "I took the liberty," Hayes admitted. "After what happened with Prescott, I thought it wise to establish the strongest possible legal bond. Judge Miller signed off yesterday." Matthew was momentarily speechless. The document made official what his heart had already accepted. These were his children now, in every sense that mattered. "Thank you," he said finally. "This means a great deal." Hayes nodded, understanding in his eyes. "One more thing. The territorial governor was impressed by your handling of the Prescott situation. There's talk of appointing a federal marshal for this region, someone who knows the land and the people." Matthew raised an eyebrow. "You're offering me a job?" "Just planting a seed. Think about it." Hayes tipped his hat. "A man like you, with skills, courage, and now roots in the community, could do a lot of good." As Hayes rode away, Anna approached, curiosity in her eyes. What was that about? Matthew handed her the adoption papers. It seems we're officially parents now. Her eyes widened as she read the document. All three children? Legally ours? If you're agreeable, Matthew said, suddenly uncertain. I know our arrangement was perfect, she interrupted, her eyes shining. Our arrangement is perfect, Matthew Crowder. Before he could respond, she leaned forward and kissed him. Not the chaste kiss of their wedding ceremony, but something warm and real and promising. When she pulled away, her cheeks were flushed. What was that for? He asked, slightly dazed. For becoming the man James always knew you could be. She folded the papers carefully. And for giving these children a father they can depend on. From the wagon, Macy called impatiently, Can we go home now? I'm hungry. Anna laughed, the sound bright in the morning air. Yes, sweetheart, we're going home. The following weeks passed in a rhythm of rebuilding and renewal. The damage from the gunfight was repaired, the barn restored, and the garden expanded under Anna's careful planning. Matthew found himself settling into family life with surprising ease. He taught Thomas tracking and marksmanship, helped June build a small greenhouse for her growing interest in plants, and carved wooden animals for Macy's ever-expanding collection. Most evenings found the family gathered in the parlor, Anna mending or reading aloud, the children engaged in quiet activities, Matthew carving or cleaning his rifle. It was a domesticity he had never imagined for himself, yet it fit like a well-worn glove. His relationship with Anna evolved naturally. Their marriage of convenience had become something neither had anticipated, a partnership of mutual respect that deepened with each passing day. They still maintained separate rooms, but their moments alone grew longer, their conversations more intimate. One evening, as they sat on the porch after the children were asleep, Anna asked the question that had lingered between them. Do you miss it, your mountain? Matthew considered before answering. Sometimes, the silence, the simplicity. He looked toward the distant peaks, silvered by moonlight. But it was a place to hide, not to live. And now? Now I have reasons to stay. His hand found hers in the darkness. Better reasons than I had to leave. She leaned against his shoulder, a comfortable weight. I've been thinking about what Marshal Hayes suggested, about you becoming a territorial marshal. It would mean time away, Matthew said cautiously. Travel throughout the region. Yes, but it would also mean making these mountains safer for everyone, including our children. She squeezed his hand. James would have approved. James always wanted me to find purpose again after the war. Matthew smiled ruefully, though I doubt he imagined it would take his death to bring me back. He knew you would return eventually. He told me once that the mountain might claim you for a time, but blood and land would call you home. The truth of those words settled in Matthew's chest. Home. Not just a place, but these people. This life. I'll consider Hayes's offer, he decided, after the harvest. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Eventually Anna spoke again, her voice hesitant. There's something else we should discuss, about our marriage. Matthew tensed slightly. What about it? It began as an arrangement of necessity, for the children's protection, for legal standing. She turned to face him, her features silver in the moonlight. But I find myself no longer viewing it as merely an arrangement. The implications of her words hung between them. Matthew studied her face, the strength, the vulnerability, the quiet hope in her eyes. Nor do I, he admitted softly. Her smile was worth every mile he had walked down from his mountain, every bullet he had faced, every fear he had conquered. Then perhaps, she suggested, it's time we discuss new arrangements. Later that night, as Anna slept beside him in what was now truly their bed, Matthew reflected on the journey that had brought him here. 7 years ago, he had fled to the mountains, a broken man running from pain and responsibility. He had built walls around his heart as solid as the granite peaks themselves. Yet James had known better, had known that eventually Matthew would find his way back, not to the blacksmith shop or the town, but to what mattered: family, purpose, honor. The gold beneath the ridge would remain largely untouched, a legacy for future generations rather than a curse. The land would continue, sustaining the family as it had for decades before them. And Matthew Crowder, once the solitary mountain man, would stand as guardian, not just of his brother's children, but of the values James had lived by: honor, family, land. Spring came to Pikes Ridge with particular beauty that year. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows, creeks ran full with snowmelt, and birds returned in noisy abundance. The Crowder homestead hummed with activity. A new addition to the house was under construction, a larger kitchen and 2 more bedrooms, needed now that the family was expanding. Anna's pregnancy had been announced at Christmas, to the children's delight. Macy immediately began crafting tiny wooden toys with Matthew's help. June prepared a special garden plot for baby herbs. Thomas, though attempting teenage nonchalance at 12, secretly built a cradle of pine and aspen wood, working on it when he thought no one was watching. Matthew had accepted the position of territorial marshal 2 months earlier. The badge felt strange on his chest at first, but he wore it with increasing confidence as he established justice throughout the region. His reputation as the mountain marshal grew, fair but firm, with an uncanny ability to track wrongdoers through the most challenging terrain. He was home more often than not, however, prioritizing family over duty when possible. Hayes had understood, arranging his assignments accordingly. On this particular spring morning, Matthew sat on the porch steps with Thomas, teaching him how to carve a whistle from green willow. The boy's hands had grown skilled over the months, his craftsmanship nearly matching Matthew's own. "Like this?" Thomas asked, making a careful cut along the branch. "Perfect," Matthew confirmed. "Now hollow out the center, but be careful not to split it." As they worked, Anna emerged from the house, one hand resting on her swollen belly. At 7 months, she moved more slowly but remained determined to maintain her usual activities. "Thomas, would you check on your sisters?" she asked. "They went to pick berries an hour ago, and I haven't heard Macy singing for some time." The boy nodded, setting aside his carving. "They probably went to the creek again. June's been watching tadpoles." When Thomas had gone, Anna lowered herself carefully onto the step beside Matthew. "It's a beautiful day." "It is." He placed his hand over hers on her belly, feeling the baby's movement beneath. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm carrying a future blacksmith," she replied wryly. "This one kicks harder than Thomas ever did." The casual reference to Thomas as an infant, a time before she had known him, no longer seemed strange. In their blended family, the lines between biological and chosen had blurred to insignificance. "I received a letter from Hayes this morning," Matthew said. "The last of Prescott's Denver partners has been convicted. 15 years in federal prison." Anna's expression lightened. "So it's truly over?" "As much as these things ever are." He squeezed her hand gently. "The syndicate has moved on to easier territories. Our land is safe." "Our land," she echoed, smiling. "James would be pleased." Yes, he would. Matthew looked out over the property, the fields greening with spring wheat, the orchard beginning to blossom, the eastern ridge where the gold lay safely sealed within stone. He always understood what mattered. "As do you now." Matthew nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. The lessons had come at great cost, but they had taken root deeply. The sound of children's laughter floated up from the path leading to the creek. Moments later, all three appeared, Thomas leading the way, June carrying a jar of what appeared to be tadpoles, and Macy with her skirt bundled into a makeshift basket overflowing with berries. "Pa, Anna," Macy called, running ahead. "We found the biggest berries ever, and June says we can make pie." "Careful with those berries," Anna cautioned, smiling. "Save some for the pie." As the children approached, Matthew felt a familiar swelling in his chest, part pride, part wonder, part fierce protectiveness. These children, this woman, this land, they had healed what the war had broken in him, had given purpose to the skills he had honed in isolation. James had known it would happen this way, had perhaps planned for it, even as he fought his final battle against Prescott's poison. "What are you thinking about?" Anna asked softly, noting his distant expression. "Legacy," Matthew replied. "What we leave behind. James left these children, this land, a purpose worth fighting for. And what will you leave?" Matthew looked at his family, Thomas tall and strong, June thoughtful and observant, Macy bright and fearless, Anna steady and wise, and knew the answer with bone-deep certainty. "Protection," he said. "Safety for what matters. A name they can be proud of." The mountain keeper, Anna murmured. Matthew raised an eyebrow. What's that? What the townsfolk are calling you now. The man who came down from the mountain to keep what matters safe. She smiled. I think it suits you better than Marshall. Before he could respond, the children reached the porch, eager to share their discoveries. June carefully displayed her jar of tadpoles, explaining her plan to observe their transformation. Thomas proudly showed a perfect arrowhead he had found embedded in a creek bank. Macy simply dumped her berry collection into Anna's lap, staining her apron purple. Careful, Macy, Anna laughed, attempting to gather the runaway berries. Sorry, Ma, the little girl replied, using the name she had recently adopted for Anna. Can we make pie now? Yes, sweetheart. Let's make pie. As Anna and the girls went inside, Thomas lingered on the porch, examining his arrowhead in the sunlight. Pa, he said thoughtfully, do you think we'll always live here, on this land? Matthew considered the question. I hope so. It's been Crowder land for 3 generations now. Will it be mine someday, to take care of? Yours and your sister's, and your new brother or sister. Matthew placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, but that's a long way off yet. Thomas nodded seriously. I want to learn everything, about the land, the gold, the mountains, everything you and Father knew. You will, Matthew promised, in time. The boy seemed satisfied with this answer. As he turned to enter the house, he paused. I'm glad you came down from your mountain, Pa. So am I, son, Matthew replied softly. So am I. Left alone on the porch, Matthew gazed toward the distant peaks where he had spent 7 years in the self-imposed exile. The mountains stood as they always had, timeless, immovable, indifferent to human concerns. Yet they had changed for him. Once a refuge from life, they now stood as sentinels guarding it. The skills they had taught him, patience, resilience, self-reliance, now served not just his survival, but his family's protection. Matthew Crowder had climbed a mountain to escape his pain. He had descended to find his purpose. And in the valley between, he had built something his brother would have recognized immediately. A legacy worth preserving. Honor, family, land. The mountain would always be there, its silent strength a reminder of where he had been. But his place was here now, in the noise and mess and joy of family, in the responsibility of safeguarding what mattered. The mountain keeper had come home. The end.